Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, an inspired conversation space between Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner on the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness.
We keep our conversations honest, our experiences real, and our philosophies exploratory. We believe that in order to raise incredible humans, we first have to raise ourselves. We know that in order to rock the family, you've got to nourish the mother. If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively, head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper. And for all live-streamed pre-release podcasts and all our free content, head over to our free Facebook group, Nourishing the Mother with Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner. We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we are so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today's podcast is Behind the Picket Fence with Julie and Nick. Hi, Nick.
Welcome, Nick.
Hi, Bridget. How are you?
I'm really excited to have Nick back on the podcast, I've got to say.
Yeah. So this is like a fantastic new thing in terms of just throwing it out there and having a go, and Bridget interviewing us, because what Bridget and I want to truly get across to anybody who ends up following us or listening to the podcast is that we truly are living what we preach. What you see on social media is the truth of who we are. You saw us down the street, it would be the same thing. You saw us in the homes with our kids, it would be the same thing. That there isn't this disparity between who we are on social media and who we are as a lived human. So I recognise the importance and the value of going behind the white picket fence with couples and actually getting to see there is no such thing as a picket fence, and everybody's dealing with their own stuff. And, you know, the invitation here was just, Bridget and I don't exactly have a plan on how this is going to roll. But, you know, I just said, Bridget, would you be interested in just throwing some questions out to Nick and I, and we just see what happens, just because we get to see other couples and see ourselves hopefully represented in those stories, rather than perceiving they're this and I'm that. You know,
which can be really hard to then relate to and feel that you can access, because you put so much between yourself and what you see, or, you know, on some kind of like pedestal, which isn't true anyway. So this is really an opportunity for us to kind of dig a little deeper into your relationship evolution and what you prioritize in your relationship to make it as powerful and potent as it is, so that our listeners can get a bit of insight.
Yeah. So thank you, because I know this is, you know, we're putting you on the fly too. So I am really grateful.
I'm excited. I love talking relationship, and I love, you know, you guys and what you represent. So it's cool. So I'm going to put it to, I think we need to start with valuing your relationship and centering your relationship as a key focal point as parents of 4 children. I mean, that is something that I think we need to kick it off with, because for many, many families, the relationship can come second to the children or to the extracurriculars or to the jobs. But with your value, Julie, particularly, I know that you have long prioritized that. Can you share a little bit about when you were clear that it needed to be centered and what that looked like to communicate with Nick?
Yeah, that's such a great question. Look, I'll start and then you feel free to chime in. How does that work?
Sure.
I perceive that we've had many evolutions of self and intimacy and relationship over the course of 4 children, because we're certainly not the same people, relationship, sex life, or humans that we are with baby number 4 to what we were with baby number 1, right?
Yep.
So baby number 1 was just, I mean, I think for so many of us, was such a whirlwind that I was completely lost in that experience of losing myself and my identity, and feeling completely unprepared for what motherhood was going to ask of me. And at the same time running such a mother wound that I could not be anything other than everything to him, to my son. But in so striving to be his everything and absolutely like whipping myself to internal bleeding when I perceived that I fell off that pedestal, which of course, I mean, you and I, Bridget, both know that's inevitable, was so soul destroying. And I can perceive that I really did plummet into a postnatal anxiety and depression that was undiagnosed. I can remember having some super dark days, and Nick then was working as we were living in inner city, and so Nick was traveling out from there, so he was working a 7 till 7, and I was just at home on my own with this baby, you know, really just lost.
And probably running yourself into the ground.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, no support network. So it was really, I mean, my first child was really a horror experience in terms of it stripped me bare.
Did you find that your relationship became a dumping ground for all of your challenge?
Yeah, I can remember hating Nick, like being so resentful of the fact that there was so much he didn't see. So much I didn't share with him, but, you know, let's just go back into my language back then. So much that he didn't see or didn't know or couldn't understand or had no capacity to do it as good as I wanted it done. So he was always failing in my eyes. And he's a really deep sleeper, bless your cotton socks. So I can remember having this baby, you know, who was in our room with us, waking, screaming, and I'm pacing for hours of the night, and he's just snoring. And I literally remember, oh my God, I literally remember one night literally kicking him so hard he rolled out of bed. And he was like, what the fuck? I really did snap in that moment and go, oh my God, Julie, what the fuck? Like,
you remember this time, Nick?
Yeah, I do. I think I've still got a mark on my back, I think. Yeah, no, I think, but I do probably agree with Jules's observations about the time, because I do think probably I wasn't aware of that. You know, I think my probably thought process at the time was, you know, I go to work and I come home and Jules, you know, looks after the, you know, Heath during the day, and, you know,
that was our roles. And
that was sort of, you know, our roles. And so, yeah, and I think that, you know, I whilst I felt or certainly thought that, you know, it was hard, and I certainly wouldn't want to be in that position, I probably didn't truly know how hard it was for Jules at the time.
Thank you for sharing that, because I think many, many men can also really feel like they play second fiddle to the baby at that time and don't get a place to put their own transition, because there's so much about the woman's, you know, becoming a mother. And some men will lose themselves in work. Like, I know my husband would get home at like 10 o'clock some nights. And I know he was busy, but probably it was better to be working than being in the intensity of like my reality.
And also you can experience success at work, whereas you come home to a partner who's like, you're a, you know, whatever.
You can't do anything. You can't do it as good as me. Like, yeah. So take us beyond that. What was it like?
So then, you know, we went through a really, I think, hard time. Like, I never thought about leaving you, but we were having a really hard time at the same time, as parenting was like a baptism by fire. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it was probably harder than I anticipated it to be.
Yeah, totes. Me too. So then probably by the time Heath was about 12 months old, by the time he was 9 months old, I'd actually found like a natural parenting community and had started to build a community around me, which made an enormous difference. So by that point in time, I'm pregnant with Jade. And we bought a house down here at that point in time, left in a city, which was a very transient place to be. So it was really hard to build community there. Whereas moving into the suburbs, which we actually didn't think that we'd ever stay here, was wonderful for me in terms of community. So there were people who were rooted and grounded and invested in family here. So that was actually a really great move, though at the time I didn't know it was going to be. And so with baby number 2, we're planning now a home birth, and I'm fully in like hippie mode, and I've, you know, totally left the system, and I'm fully breastfeeding, going to be co-sleeping, which we totally did. I wore her for every single sleep. Like, she was on my body 23 out of 24 hours, just about, you know. But I had such a glorious birth and postnatal experience with her without the exhaustion and the pain and the suffering that I had had with my first, that I became more available as a partner. So despite the fact that I had a child on me for 23 hours of the day, I had more to give Nick.
Because you were more embodied in your own experience and
less exhausted. Yeah, I was actually less exhausted and was more in love with my life and felt on purpose with what I was doing in raising these children. Whereas I think with Heath, I was really lost in what my purpose was. And if you're fumbling around feeling stripped bare and what you're doing doesn't have purpose, how hard is that to stay in? So by the time I got to number 2, I was so devoted to parenthood and found everything that I wanted out of it: personal growth, development in communication. I had done, you know, then on the natural parenting pathway, did all of the parenting courses, which of course you can't help but then feed into your relationship, right? So what I'm learning about aware parenting is feeding into our relationship. What I'm learning about nonviolent communication is feeding into our relationship. So, and because my body had felt so good after that birth, I can remember being completely open to wanting and willingly wanting to have sex like 2 weeks after she was born, because I felt so good. Like, I just felt good. My hormones were good. My body felt good. Yeah, you know, I've got stretch marks and boobs that do weird things and all things, but I actually had a level of vitality in my body that I didn't have with baby number 1. So I still know that I gave more to parenting and less to my own self-care than I would choose to do now. But I definitely started to re-navigate towards, this is hard. We started counselling, I think, with her, didn't we?
Yes, I think we did.
Yeah.
Or a bit after, but yeah.
Yeah. So I had really gone, I have enough resources now, and this is important enough to me that I'm willing to put focus onto this. And I'm going to bring these skills, and I totally want someone to guide me and us, because I'm stuck in my shit and you're stuck in your shit. And what does this look like to move beyond it? So we went through an intensive counselling period, which was really great. And then it started to peter off to like a once a month check-in. And then we didn't need it anymore about a year after that. Would you say that's true too?
Yeah, we've not actually forgotten about that.
And actually, funnily enough, one of the main things that I remember talking about in that counselling was sex drive, because at that point in time, my perception was that Nick had none. And mine was overinflated to the point where I was the needy partner who was like, give me this thing, like, give it to me. I need it every day. And, you know, the fact that you don't means I'm unattractive and you don't like me. And it was hugely like polarizing in its language. And now I look at me, we didn't actually get the advice that I would now give myself. But back then, I can now see myself in so many of the partners that I work with and go, yeah, I get it. And yet none of that is actually about sex, and none of that is actually about your partner. It's just like a drug. And I didn't want to be with the feelings that are inside of me. So it was easy to go, I need this thing so I don't have to feel these things.
As like a release.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I get to do this thing as opposed to feeling this thing. And the fact that you're not giving it to me is the reason why I feel this way, not because those feelings were there to begin with, you know. So I can see so much of that evolution of neediness in myself. And I think it's my own healing of my neediness that as I've healed that and re-healed my connection to my own body and beauty and certainly sexual story, the more alive our sex life has become. Would you say that's different?
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. Yeah, I think that there's been a big shift, you know, in the last 5 years, or yeah, for sure.
Did your perception, Nick, of Julie shift when she was less needy? Like, was there something, yeah, because the way that neediness manifests is it can become like almost repulsive. Like the more that someone needs you, the more you're like, get away from me, right? And so as she began to take ownership of her neediness as something for herself to work through, did that shift how you met her?
Look, I mean, I don't remember. I wouldn't have necessarily put it in this case. Look, Julie's much better at remembering this stuff than I am.
I'm sorry, I put you on.
But I think, yeah. Well, I don't look at it as, I suppose, neediness. But I think I just over, I suppose, time that we've. And I guess whether these were things we're going to talk about, but evolved as far as our communication and, like I've obviously, Jules has got me listening to some books and attending some courses and things like that. So, slowly I'm evolving a little bit. But I think that, from that I have a far greater understanding now, and probably within the last, couple of years more so of, I guess what she needs, to make herself feel good. And I think going back to the question, I know that the answers normally go this long on this.
Well, yes, and I usually deviate.
I was thinking about the question, I forgot the question, but I was going to say that. Now I've forgotten what I was going to say, but I think. I think I have a far greater understanding about, certainly what Jules desires, needs, and how I can provide that for her. Whereas probably, when Heath and Jade were born, certainly didn't
know what I needed.
Yeah.
Do you think that you possessed the skill set then that you do now?
I think. I think yes. Was there an acceptance to because I think at the end of the day, it's probably, and I know this is probably something that's, driven you mad over the years, is that my reluctance to necessarily learn to change and that, and so I think I have that, reluctance there. And so, was a skill set there to change? Yes, but it was probably held back by a reluctance of, talking about this or exploring these things a little bit more. And I don't know whether it's old age, maturity, whatnot. I'm probably more accepting of it now, or I'm, I see the greater good and the better reasons to do it.
What is that reluctance? What would you say that is? I've never heard you describe it that way. I just thought it genuinely you weren't interested.
Look, I'm probably not as interested as reading other things and looking up, but I think that, I guess it's more, I see that the need to evolve our relationship is important.
Why?
So that I'm happy, you're happy, we have a great relationship, we have fun, we have, so it continues to grow and get better, because I think it has.
Yeah, it has. What do you think would happen?
Asking the question.
Yeah, who's asking? Not me. Stop it, Julie.
You're asking the same ones I was going to ask, but I wonder if for you, Nick, there's obviously a point where you're realizing, this investment is paying dividends for me and for us. There's probably been, I don't know, you don't have to identify it, but at some point there's been feedback for you that said, like me orienting toward the relationship now.
There's always been feedback.
There's always been feedback.
Feedback's a gift, isn't it?
Feedback is a gift, isn't it?
Sometimes I feel like a slap in the face, but yes, ultimately.
Look, the feedback's been pretty consistent.
Delivered with love, I'm sure.
You invited me on. This is my chance to speak.
No, I actually really love it. I think it's endearing.
No, I think whether I go back to the reluctance or not. I mean, I think over time, sometimes it's probably taken several, I guess, hard conversations for it to sink in. Sometimes I think, like I think I've always been a pretty good listener, but I think also for me, probably get stuck on some of the points that are probably made, and I'm probably stuck on things that Jules actually isn't talking to me about either. So, but for me, that's where I'm stuck. So I think sometimes it's taken a little while to, to get it through my thick head, and I think that slowly, as it starts to creep in and change, then I think, slowly over time, I guess it starts to maybe increase or build on what you've already learnt and heard. And so, and I've probably listened to a few more things in the last few years as well. So,
because there was a time when you just couldn't even understand the words masculine and feminine.
Well, there were some podcasts that you put me onto, and I was listening to them, and I just could not.
Couldn't understand them.
It was just well above my level. So, so I did listen to that. I don't know, it was like 4 hours, but it was, just was over. Oh, look, there was little bits and pieces, but I was trying to work out what they were talking about.
But you had the grace to still listen to.
Well, I thought I'm going to listen to this stuff, and there's got to be something. I mean, I'm always of the opinion that, like, even if it's any of these things, you might be there for 3 hours, but you generally come away with one or two things, and that's, so there could be one or two bits of gold in there somewhere. I was panning pretty hard for the gold, I think. But yeah, I mean, I think that over time, and I suppose it's probably got a little bit better. And I think that, as my understanding of probably masc and femme, as you call
masc and femme, yeah. We've talked about switching language from masculine and feminine to masc and femme. But I will say that even that is flawed, because obviously, as you and I, Bridget, both know that it's very gendered-based language. And whilst Nick and I have talked about this, whilst I identify as queer and polyamorous, I'm very comfortable in identifying as masc and identifying as femme. But Nick is less comfortable identifying as femme. It's not really something that aligns for him. So we've looked at what are the words that describe and help you identify just this aspect of self. So usually the language that Nick and I use is giving and receiving, when you're feeling like giving and when you're feeling like receiving. Would you say that's been easier for you?
Yes.
Or talking and listening, one or the other?
Yeah. Yes, I do. But what I was saying was that I think that, and I'll give a plug to your book. That's something else I do, was read your book.
You did read my book. We actually had a bet, because he'd never read, he just did not read anything.
That's not true.
Okay, that's not true. Read tiny bits of things.
Read things are important to me.
And so we had a bet when I published my book, and I was like, you're not going to read my book. I had no attachment to it whatsoever. I was like, I don't even care. It's fine. It's not for you. It doesn't matter.
You sure you had no attachment? I
didn't have any attachment. I did bet you on it, though. I was like, you're not going to read it. I'll bet that you don't read it. He's like, I'll bet you I do read it. And you did. So, and that actually did make some sense to you, didn't it? There was things that landed in there for you.
Yeah, well, that's I guess that over time is just the understanding the difference between the two. I think that was a good thing for me to learn, and I think that has made a big difference to our relationship. Yeah.
Has that opened you more to the practices, like removing the gender construct around it?
Yeah, I think so. I think think that Jules and I will talk about this today, but I suppose the whole, I guess I wanted to, love Jules and wanted to do the right thing and get it right. And maybe that's one of the biggest things that maybe pissed her off about me, was that, you know, I'd always check in, and, you know, and I dare say a lot of relationships have that similar issue, that, you know, we're trying to get it right, but we get it wrong, and often we're told we get it wrong. And so, you know, I think this is where I think we've, you know, our communication, that has certainly changed, where, you know, I kind of know where, you know, I've convinced myself, I suppose, to take risks and just to do things, make decisions without checking in with Jules, because I know that if you know, I guess I get it right, and I think but also on the flip side too, I think that she obviously understood that that's how I felt as well, that, you know, this is what I'm trying to do, and every time, you know, you tell me it's not right, well, that makes it harder for me to do it. So I think at least we both understand where it's coming from. So, you know, for me, I suppose it's sort of knowing what she wants, and her understanding the reasons why, you know, I've probably done that in the past. And that, you know, I guess that she, I think sometimes, you know, she's quite over the top with her celebration sometimes, and I think that, you know, when I've done some things,
you love that.
I'm just you play on it, and that's great. But, you know, it certainly plays up on it. So, you know, it does.
He's talking about femme amplification, and he does actually love it. If I'm going to reward you for something, I'm going to be like, "Oh my gosh, it's amazing!" And then we get through the density.
Was there a negative tone in what I just said?
I don't know. I'm just clearing it up for our listeners.
But what I did hear Nick highlight then was that the recognition of a relationship pattern where you're coming at him saying something's wrong and wrong and wrong, to the point where he's then feeling like he can't take a right step. So he's just asking you all the time, which you're getting pissed off about. And it's, you know,
because I don't want to make the decisions.
You want to be led.
No. Yeah. And I want to be led. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So really coming to that, which is what we spend, you know, which is what my book is about, and which is what Queen School is about, is coming from the place of deeply understanding a deeply masc partner's desire to provide. But that's coming from a place of love, which was what I really had to, for me, what I hear in Nick's words is when he goes, for Jules to understand that I want to meet her. I want to give her what she wants. I want her to have what she wants. I'm just trying to navigate how to do that. And especially as our relationship, communication, and sexuality has opened, deepened, widened, and each time you do that leap, you're in uncharted waters. So what used to work no longer does, and yet you don't know what is going to. And so it's this weird space to play in each time, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
So me really deeply understanding that I truly do get to have everything I want, and that my turn on desire, me feeling fulfilled, is what fulfills Nick, as opposed to me running this skewed concept of what I think he's thinking. So really, 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 truly in my heart and body feeling how deeply this man wants to give me what I want. So all that's in the way of that is just working out what it's not and working out what it is, and being with whatever comes up in the process of that, which sometimes, and especially for me, and we've certainly been on many, each time we up level, oh, hello, sexual trauma again. And back we go, you know, sometimes it's like 5 steps forward and then 3 steps back, and then off we go again. So I do just deeply understand that there is such a desire, and from every man that I've ever worked with, deeply want to, we say, do the right thing, and we can put labels on that around, well, that's socialization and the education system and, you know, the little boy, and all, we can put meaning onto it, or we can look at it and feel into the intent that comes behind that, which is, I want you to have everything you want.
Which actually can be really hard for some women to feel, because sometimes it's actually much safer to feel all of the reasons why he can't, like the conditioning, like, you know, all of that other stuff that you're talking about. It's safer to be there and saying that he can't than actually feel into, well, how could he?
Yeah.
And what would that mean for my identity and everything that I've built my own safety around to trust that?
Yeah.
It's some of the biggest work, right?
Right.
which you're so great at because look at this journey, right?
Yeah. This podcast is brought to you by Lovers School, redefining pleasure, passion, and polarity in relationship. This is 4 modules and 4 weeks of live support with me, with community coaching calls, downloadable workbooks, a private Facebook community, and 4 modules of content: polarity, primal, passion, and potency, all about building the sexual chemistry, the communication that holds it, and the hot and satisfying sex that is what you want to be living. So you can find out more about joining me at Lovers School at julietenner.love, and you are more than welcome to bring your partner.
Nick, I'd like to know, how has it been for you meeting Julie in her sexual trauma and moving beyond it?
Simple terms, it's been okay. How's it been? Well,
or what do you think it's pivotal for? What do you think it is pivotal for couples to know as they navigate that?
Look, I think I'd say that the thing that sometimes I struggle with a little bit is sometimes it's the need for, or that I think that I express to Jules something that I like or love about her, or and that
about my body or
bad body, something like that, and that it's almost like she's asking me to, doesn't believe me, or asked to repeat those sort of things. Like I say to you a lot, and you kind of question me because I wouldn't say it if I didn't, So, but I guess on the flip side of that too, though, I think that as you alluded to before, I mean, I think Jules is pretty open, and so certainly she's spoken to me or talks to me a lot about it, or this may happen, or this is what I need, and this will help me. And I think going back to yes, that I might have to repeat a
sentence
or something 10 times over, and I'll go and she say it again. And it's like, look, maybe I internally roll my eyes a little bit, but I also understand that she's expressed to me that she needs this, and I know that it might feel a little funny at the time, but I also know that it's helping her as much as it may feel a little bit awkward or weird for me repeating these things or something like that. But I think that I know that that's what she needs, and I know that I guess on the other side, then again, it's rewarded with better connection and more love from her, I suppose, on the other side once she's through that, and I think she's expresses her appreciation that I'm there for her, and so I don't actually find. I don't think I find it that difficult or awkward. It's a little, sometimes it's a little bit.
It can be odd. It can be awkward.
But but generally, I'd say, she's also quite verbal in what she needs and to help her. So I think that makes a big difference. That I also understand that what she needs, because if she was leaving me there to
work that shit out,
that on my own, then I'm sure as hell wouldn't get there.
Yeah. How much has her setting you up for that meant that you're able to stay there? Because I sense, it's a great amount of vulnerability for you, Jules, to actually be willing to ask, and then for you, Nick, to go out of your comfort zone and keep doing this thing that you must be thinking, but why? I've already said it. Why don't you get it? To hold yourself in the frustration that's happening in your body, and then Julie, you regulate yourself sensing his frustration. That's big.
Yeah, it is big, isn't it? Thank you for pulling that out and hovering over it, because it truly is. I think that I just know the reward of awkwardness, that if I'm really willing, if I really perceive that my ultimate truth is wholeness, then anything that's in the way of that can be brought forwards, right? So when I notice that I contract backwards or inwards, or I like close up and go, or I just left my body, then my practice is always, whoa, I just went somewhere. Whoa, I'm not here. And instead of trying to make myself keep doing the thing, which is easy to do, right? Because we could easily do that. Oh, Bridget's frozen. Is that my internet or yours? Can you still hear me?
I can still hear you.
Okay, that's all right then. We'll keep going. Because I think that how I continued to suppress sexual trauma was by making my body do things that I wasn't there for, because somehow we were on this train and it was easier just to keep going on it. And my sexual trauma could also manifest in that intense sexual need and in promiscuity and a lack of love and respect and devotion in my body, that I was fucking, but I definitely wasn't connected or making love or healing or moving sexual energy. Not really. So when I could really see that and really feel into how deeply Nick wanted to meet me, and also I would say, though, in between those two spaces was the really messy middle where I was pretty sure Nick didn't want to read a book, wasn't ever going to play in the tantric circles or, you know, whatever alternative circles I was playing in. And I was ready for sex that was healing and was going to move my sexual trauma and navigate me spiritually somewhere. And I was 100% sure Nick was not going to be able to do that. And I literally gave you an ultimatum, didn't I? Which was, now I consider, one of the most horrific. I do not advise any couples to do what I did. I've learnt the hard way. Was one of the most horrific things where I said, you know what? The sex we've been having is fucking shit. I hate it. Like, and Nick's like, where the fuck has this come from? Like, I thought what we were doing was great. And then I was like, these are the things that I need, because I'd just like done this trip on my own, hadn't brought him with me at all, hadn't entered any of the ickiness, the awkwardness, the trauma, hadn't considered how to. What was more egoic and protective was for me to go, you can't meet me. So either you're going to do these things or I'll be getting them somewhere else outside of here because you're choosing not to.
God, ouch.
Yeah, it was fucking brutal. Like, I'm here talking about this now, but I have certainly in other spaces and places talked about this and broken down into tears because that was both equally my tyrannical, toxic, masculine and feminine playing in one foul swoop where I just basically sliced you into 1,000 pieces, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So we had to find our way through that messy middle to even be able to be where we are now.
I just want to honor like the depth of that journey, like to kind of go to that place and then continue to show up for what you knew could be possible or what you sensed could be possible to what you're finding now and continuing to find. Like, it's really big for both of you.
Yeah.
No, and thank you for sharing it with our audience too, because like it's really, you know, it's vulnerable stuff.
Yeah, it is. But what happened in that was that conversation didn't end. We just basically separated and said, we're going to come back to this. You had asked for a week, hadn't you?
Probably.
Yeah.
I'd probably thought a month, but I thought you wouldn't give me a month.
I'll give you a month. So we both had time to sit with that and for a week, which was actually really good because we almost both went off. We were still doing Family Inc. because we had to, but then we were both in our own way doing our own journey. And what did this mean? And what was the reconciliation and what was the self-ownership and what were we in for when we met again on the other side? And that was amazing because that was the time that I can remember just like being, I'm not here to live this half life. Like, I'm here to play it all out on the dance floor and fuck being scared anymore. And I can remember both of us just like broken and sobbing and so deeply feeling that truth. Once you felt that in your soul and your heart, you can't come back.
You can't go back from that.
Yeah. So then it just became, okay, how are we doing this together? And, you know, I mean, you know me, Bridget, I'm a bit of a bull at a gate. And my pace often is something that I've had to really sit with, which is I perceive is also part of my trauma story. So recognizing deeply how much Nick wanted to meet me, and me recognizing that me not wanting to slow it down was also me avoiding the thing that I needed to be with.
Which was possibly your slowness, like, because part of healing your trauma was how slow can you go?
Totes. Yeah. Yeah. And everything that came up in that. And so our communication really has been born out of that, was because we had to. It was, we have to do this like in the minutiae and be incredibly clear in our communication, or potentially we were not together, or we were not having a sexual relationship that was going to be together, that we would look at whether we were outsourcing that or alternative structures of relationship. So yeah, I mean, I kind of think that's part of when I realized how much of my trauma existed and what it needed, and that I got to ask Nick for that. And I had all of the stories in my head, which meant he wouldn't be able to, you know, all of that stuff. So being able to say, you know what, this thing's probably going to come up, and here's what I need, and here's what that needs. And so when that happens, here's what I want to be able to do. And Nick was like, okay. So by the time that thing came up, you weren't sideswiped by it. You were like, oh, okay, this is what I do in this moment. And then the fact that he could do that, and then he could watch me literally unravel years of trauma in front of him, and then open into the most extraordinary, I mean, some of those moments have been the most extraordinary sexual moments that we've ever had. I mean, how can you ever come back from that?
Well, you're kind of answering my next question, which was really around that, like, fuck, like, you know, women listening going, I don't know if my partner could step up. But here you're saying the power of some of that healing was so transformative that it committed you both to continuing to step up because of the reward in that. Would you say that would be true, Nick?
Yeah, I'd agree. You know, going back to the 1,000 lashes, that, you know,
yeah,
it was. I wouldn't encourage that type of. It was.
No, it was horrific.
It was like totally blindsided, and it was just bang. It was like, whoa, where the hell did that come from?
Yeah.
And I was pretty angry about that, because I thought that, you know, certainly preached about communication and all that sort of stuff. And it's like, well, you'd never said anything of that to me before. So,
because I was almost living a private spiritual and sexual life, because I was pretty sure Nick wasn't interested, couldn't meet me in that. So there was no point sharing it with him.
And then, of course, the more that you're telling yourself that story,
the more I'm outsourcing it.
And then, you know, that you're building the charge, and then it takes the tiniest thing, and then you're like, unload on him.
Yeah. So for Nick, it was out of the blue. And for me, I'm like, are you shitting me? This is like years.
How heartbreaking, Nick, to hear that. Like, fuck.
It was.
How deceptive is that, right?
I was fucking angry.
Yeah. I totally get it, because it's the ultimate.
It is deceptive. It's
about betrayal. Yeah, but here it is. Me not sharing my transparency with him is betrayal.
Yeah, I feel that.
So
did it take you a long time, Nick, to trust Julie again, or to feel safe in your own vulnerability with her after her withholding that and then unleashing?
I'm pretty forgiving, I think.
Now that you think about it again.
Yeah.
it was a pretty profound healing we had on that one night, though.
I don't think that I'd necessarily lost trust. I mean, I think that, you know, one thing that's, you know, another thing that's always annoyed Jules, that we talked about, you know, coming back together a week later, that one of our bigger communication issues earlier on was we'd potentially have an argument, and you know, Jules just thought wouldn't say anything, stonewalling, and I'm sitting there trying to process the first couple of sentences of the argument, and she's moved on, and you know, so I guess we over time have come to an understanding that you know, at least I've got to come back to her with I'll come back to you in a 24 hours, 48 hours, or
we've got different processes.
I got to process this because I'm still trying to work it out. So probably the reality was, it would have that took me a while to I guess process that, and you know, I'm not saying that you know, I think that the processing we talked about, you know, feedback being a gift. I think I take feedback pretty well, and I think I analyse it fairly well, and I can see that, okay, well, these are all these things that have, you know, that were said, you know, and I can look back and go, okay, well, I can, instead of sitting there arguing, saying, you know, that's not me, I think generally, you know, I can look and go, okay, I can see that that's me in that scenario, that situation, or I haven't met you there, and different things like that. And so I go, okay, you know, I think that's, you know, maybe I do it sometimes, not enough, and or whatnot. But I think that you know, it probably took me a while to take in a lot of that stuff, but also I think that I own it fairly well. That I can go, okay, all right, well, I do, you know, need to be better at those things. So I
just want to say that's your beautiful mask, though, right? Is that capacity that's like, whoa, that was really intense feedback. That's a really big challenge. I'm going to reflect on it, put the pieces of the puzzle together, and then go, I'm ready to rise. I can do better. I can see how I can do better, be better, know more, show up better. Like that's the result of a beautiful mask, and I would say of an incredible elite sporting background, is that capacity to be deeply challenged, to receive less than flattering feedback, and to go, I'm going to let it make me better.
As opposed to collapsing and making you wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it has made him a better lover, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So it wasn't like my 1,000 lashings was without legs.
Yes, that it actually had purpose in the end, but it's just that you've now learned
the delivery of it, which
a better way to communicate that.
Horrendous. But I also just have really deep compassion for the me and the Nick that was back then.
Yeah,
doing the best they could with what they knew,
and sometimes there's a lot of, you know, there's a burning down that needs to happen, and that's not pretty.
Yeah,
in order to build something new.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was definitely a pivotal change in how we were having sex, wasn't it?
I think so.
I'm going to give one final question, I guess, for both of you. Polarity is so key to your teachings, Julie, because polarity is essentially what cultivates chemistry in any relationship, but particularly in a long-term relationship where it's very, very easy to just be mates, or to just get caught up in family ink, and to not prioritize that delicious flow of life force in your body that sexuality and sensuality provides. But do you want polarity all the time? And how do you, I guess, decide that it's what you want to cultivate? Decide that there's need for it.
So I don't think that you want polarity all of the time, because sometimes I actually just want to hang out with my best friend. Or when Nick's sitting down to help me with my taxes, I don't need there to be a sexual zing between us. What I need is his mind and my mind to meet and to do something great. And when we're working out, okay, you've got to take Heath there and I'm taking Jade here, and we've got to be there at the dentist, and we're doing Family Inc., we also don't need sexual zing between us. But what we don't want to do is get so far into the zero polarity friend zone, or, you know, directors of Family Inc. zone, that we don't have a capacity to have a baseline simmer. I think you need a baseline simmer, so you're not starting a car from, you know, stone cold. You need a baseline simmer. And the skill set to be able to pick each other when you're wanting to reconnect. And your sexuality in your relationship is no different to a garden. I have to tend to that garden in order for it to be fruitful and for me to harvest the fruits that I love and feed me and my family. But if I just like plant the tree originally and then don't water it and let the trees grow, weeds grow around it and the bugs eat it, and it's unkempt, I'm not then going to harvest a great crop from it. So if we want to yield something from any area of our life, it requires tending. And our sexuality and our relationship are no different. So it's easy to take it for granted. And I think that complacency is the biggest killer of chemistry in relationship. Polarity requires that you have your own relationship to self and to self-sexuality, which is not sex, it's just the energy of life force in your body, and the connection of that with another human. It requires that that's front of mind or has its own sacred space carved out for it. It's tended to. So I tend to that garden within myself, and I tend to that garden within Nick and I, so that we always have a simmer. So when it feels really great for us to all of a sudden build it into a roaring flame, we can. And that's freedom. But if you don't have that, you're in a cage, right? There's no choice there. There's no freedom of movement there. What would you say?
Yeah, well, I think touching on, I think the original question that Bridget asked might have been.
I loved it. I loved all the metaphors. Great.
But I do think that we now prioritise time for ourselves. And, I think particularly in the last 18 months with COVID and living in a small house with 4 kids and homeschool, and this is, and
a preschooler.
Yeah. And so I think that it certainly but we've prioritised time for ourselves to, and it may not always be a lot of time, but I guess being aware of we need to tend to the garden. I think that's has been an important thing for us. But and I guess the things that Jules was touching on before, that we're busy, and we're I have one focus on my mind when we work. That's what I'm thinking about, and I struggle with thinking about other things. So but I know that I also need to I guess probably earlier on that was my focus, and wouldn't think too much.
I was doing work, or I was doing parenting.
And so I think now I have a far greater understanding that I guess about the polarity and as keeping the simmering of a relationship simmering and things like that, but being able to focus on things during the day. But it is okay to switch off for 5 minutes, or focus on Jules, or whether it's a exchange in the hallway or something, but I guess acknowledge or recognise her during the day. I see you, I choose you, sort of thing. So those sort of things, a few things here and there add up to bigger things.
Yeah, beautiful. Oh, thank you both so much, and thank you, Nick, for being courageous enough to come on the podcast again.
Oh, it's been another 6 years.
It's not his comfort zone.
I thought that wasn't that bad, was it?
No, it was a lovely experience.
And you've got the expert interviewer, Bridget.
I know. Thank you, Bridget. You're very gentle on me. Thank
you. I was. So coming up very soon, our listeners can learn.
I have Lovers School.
A whole lot more about this stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So Lovers School is a 4-week relationship container that is focused on polarity. So really understanding what the masc and the femme interplay is within yourself and within your relationship, working out what's in the way of that in communication. So there's 4 modules: polarity, which is obviously creating polarity, and reorienting to embodiment, moving away from performance. PRIMAL, which is building sexual chemistry and discovering what you want. Safety for opening deeper than you ever have before. Passion, which is intensifying sexual sizzle in your day-to-day and building strong communication. And potency, which is creating hot sex and satisfying foreplay. So it's really the culmination of what I've come to learn over the course of, obviously I grew up with a different upbringing, that I was brought up by a tantric yogi father. So the way that it sits in my body is very different. And then you add on to that I had childhood sexual abuse, and that continued in various forms in my teens and early 20s. And what it looks like to move through that and being a co-parent, a co-sleeping, fully breastfeeding, fully there mum of 4 children in a relationship that's lasted 20 years, what that looks like to be able to do these things and create a super satisfying sex life and intimacy and connection in a way that, honestly, you had told me 10 years ago that Nick and I could have the fully satisfying sex life that me, as the queer, polyamorous, tantric woman, wanted, I would have said, no way. I've chosen the wrong partner. And really what it is I've just had to learn everything that was in the way and really sit with my own trauma. So Lovers School is really about the learning of really deeply bringing your partner on a journey to create an experience. The two of you are focused on your relationship, your sex, your communication, and your trauma. And we all have trauma. We all have hang-ups. We all have stuff that gets in the way. So that's really what I want this focus to be, is how do we build a deeply satisfying sex life, not because, we have super cocks and we fuck like animals, but because when you build a capacity to open your heart and your body and feel deeply safe and have incredible communication on the nuances of what you want, the only outcome of that is deeply fulfilling sex. Add anything to that?
I said it beautifully.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thanks. So Lovers School, you can find out more at julietenner.love, and on the socials, same thing. Beautiful. And you, Bridget?
Coming up, it's just starting this week, actually, Disrupt, Revealing the Mother Wound, which you can find out at bridgetwood.life. And remember to nourish the woman to rock the family.
And we see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
Thank you so much for listening. We literally couldn't do this without you. Please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively into your life, then head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper.
And if you feel like giving back a little to this free content, please rate us on iTunes or Facebook, all of which helps the podcast reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.